one member participating remotely. Selectman Conlon is going to be participating remotely, and so all of our votes will be roll call votes. So, get right into the agenda. First item is to approve the bills, payrolls, and warrants.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and a second. Again, this requires a roll call vote. Mrs. Cassavant?
Aye.
Ms. Flynn?
Aye.
Mrs. Samia?
Aye.
Ms. Conlon?
Aye.
And Mr. Paulo? Aye. Okay. Announcements, reports. Does anybody have any announcements this evening? Okay. I have a couple. A few months back, we started recognizing employees who started with the town and who retired. Since August 1st, we've had 3 new hires in the Department of Public Works: James Fleming, Special Equipment Operator in the Highway Division. We had Malgazada Stolarska, Solid Waste and Recycling Program Manager, and Samuel Mackin, Administrative Assistant. And we had one retirement, Bruce Anderson, Senior Building Custodian at Coolidge School. He served the town for 35 years. We thank him for his many years of service and wish him the best of luck in his retirement. And Bruce, I can tell you, it's wonderful. It was worth waiting the 35 years to get there, so congratulations. Anyone else? Nope. Okay. Next order of business is the manager's report. Mr. Mizuka?
Good evening, board members. Just a couple things this evening. With regards to our strategic planning process, the Shoesbree 2030 initiative, we are going to hold an additional in-person event this Thursday, August 25th at 12:30 at the Senior Center to engage with folks there. So we've been promoting that event. And then the second thing that I wanted to mention is that with the community's investment in capital infrastructure for Dean Park, we will be closing the playground area to the public on or about August 29th. That will be closed until further notice and likely take at least 6 or 8 weeks. The improvements there will include a new swing set, sandbox, merry-go-round, climbing features, improvements to accessibility, enhancements to fencing, and the regrading of the surface area of the playground. So we definitely appreciate everyone's patience during this rehabilitation of the Dean Park Playground, and we look forward to reopening it as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, next order of item on the agenda is public comment period. We didn't have anybody sign up ahead of time, so there is no public comment this evening. Next order of business is fiscal year 2022 year-end financial review. Mr. Mizuka, would you like to take us through that?
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. We've just spent a couple minutes in providing some high-level feedback to the board on fiscal year 22. Most folks know that we operate on a fiscal year basis that runs from July 1st through June 30th, so we just closed the books a little less than 2 months ago, and all of our preliminary financial analysis is nearing completion. We'll be submitting it to the State Department of Revenue for certification of free cash and other things related to that. So we started fiscal year 22 budget process, in the fall really of 2020 into 2021, and it went from July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. That provides a challenge when we're projecting both revenues and expenses, but it's something we do every year, and I'm happy to show our performance this evening. So we started off with an operating budget, general operations of $136,139,713, and that includes municipal school and operations, but excludes our utility operations, which are about $17 to $18 million. At the end of the year, we had unexpended appropriations of $2.5 million, which means we expended 98.16% of the revenue. So I know many folks could look at the $2.5 million and question, the budget, but really, with it being less than 2%, we can't get much closer than that. As everyone knows, we have limited capability to adjust line items mid-year. We have a reserve fund balance that we can rely upon, but still being able to get within 2% of our original plan is very good. I commend departments for staying within budget, but we are using the resources that residents provide to us. Those turnbacks will become or remain an asset of the community and be part of our free cash calculation that we submit to the Department of Revenue, and we'll likely use that in the future in some one-time expenses or for capital improvement plan initiatives in the future. So Taylor, if you can move on. So I'm going to talk about our two main local revenue categories this evening. I can get into any questions that you may have about the turnbacks or anything else, but I wanted to make sure we focused on revenues and how we perform there. So local receipts is our third largest revenue category. It trails both real and personal property tax and state aid. And in total, we anticipated a little less than $11 million in local receipts. Throughout the course of the year, we actually collected $13.3 million, almost $13.4 million in local receipts. So we had another strong year. We experienced a very sharp and beneficial recovery from the slight downturn that we had in fiscal year 22 associated with the pandemic. We had 2.25% growth from fiscal year 21 to 22, which is a solid number, but it's roughly 50% of the annual growth rate that we were experiencing in the 5 years prior to fiscal year 20. So something that we need to keep focused on, because we have used those historical growth years of 5 and 6% in our forecasting that we do for the revenue side when we start the budget process. So it's something that we'll be revisiting as we start to look ahead to fiscal year 24 and plan for that budget cycle. We did have revenues at $2.5 million over the estimate, as shown here on the screen. But as we saw the growth coming back throughout fiscal year 21 and into 22, as we were working through the 22 budget process and 23 budget process, we've significantly increased our budget estimate. So moving into the fiscal year 23 budget, we've planned for $11,965,000. So FY22 numbers still exceeded what we have planned for fiscal year 23, but without that 5 or 6% growth, we're going to close that gap, I would anticipate, in fiscal year 22. And Taylor, if you can move on, I just wanted to get into some details with regards to how those main categories within local receipts played out. As we talk about a lot, roughly 50% of the receipts that come in are from motor vehicle excise. And this is the first year in a long time without a pandemic asterisk that we've seen a decline year over year in motor vehicle excise. Certainly not surprising when you drive past most new car dealerships and the lots are empty, and we know and hear stories of it taking 4, 6, 8 months to order a new vehicle. So if that's the new normal, we're certainly going through a sluggish period of people figuring that out or making those discretionary decisions to buy new vehicles or trade in their vehicles, and it's certainly impacted our revenue. Not a big impact for fiscal year 22. We came in just $105,000 under budget. My largest concern at this point is that we anticipated growth into fiscal year 23 and have set the budget at $6.5 million for this receipt category. This is something that we're going to have to revisit in the fall. Obviously, being $2.5 million over on a bottom line basis, we have plenty of room to reconsider our local receipts, and it shouldn't have to push revenues down from the plan that we created in the spring. But it's something that we do want to keep our eye on understand what's happening in the motor vehicle industry and consumers' expectations. And then we may have to revise these numbers going into '24 and into the future as well. So meals tax is almost the opposite. We were seeing significant uncertainty in the restaurant industry during the time that we were budgeting in early of 2021. The world was, or the United States was facing the Delta variant, and certainly this region wasn't even open to full in-person dining. That had rapidly changed as we moved into fiscal year '22. And we've experienced that in meals tax, having restaurants open, having more restaurants really that are fully functioning than we had prior to the pandemic has really benefited the community. So that's something that the receipt category that we did increase for fiscal year '23 and will continue to rely upon in the future. Cannabis-related activities remain strong within the community. However, there is significant legislation that was just signed into law by the governor that will impact revenues going forward in this category and will, especially within the area of host community agreements. Roughly 50% of the revenue that we received is from cannabis excise, and 50% of it is from host community agreements that we have with those entities that operate within the community. We will have much more limited ability to realize that revenue in the future, something we're working with. We'll work with the businesses and legal counsel through to see what the near-term and long-term impacts are going to be for us. Both departmental fees and licenses and permits are the strongest numbers that we've seen in either of those categories. Licenses and permits specifically show strong construction, both commercial and residential growth within the community. The $1.4 million is the highest that we've ever realized in any given year for licenses and permits, and was $614,000 over the budget. Department fees, again, at $1.5 million, very strong, and is the highest number we've realized there. Landfill receipts for the lease of the space to Wheelabrator are very consistent and close to budget. And then the various other miscellaneous categories certainly perform strong as well. So all in all, a great year for local receipts. I think we have some interim line items that we need to look at, but we'll continue to refine this for both the FY23 budget when we go to town meeting and then into FY24. So Taylor, if you could move ahead just a couple more slides here. This is the budget to actual. I know it's really hard to see on the screen there, but the red lines are actual, the blue lines are what we had budgeted. So many of the categories we were really close, and then a few there were some exceptional growths and historic levels that we realized in several receipt categories. Taylor, if you can just move on. So finally, kind of saving the largest revenue category for the final part of our conversation is the real estate tax. With the board's policies that we set last fall and moving into the fiscal year 22 budget process, with regards to the operational override that was passed in May of 2021, we anticipated and billed out just over $96.5 million, almost $96.6 million. We had very strong revenue collections. Nearly 99% of all revenue that was committed was received. And I've provided a snapshot back to fiscal year 2019. This is a very traditional and average year for our collections, which is good. We're always very strong in real estate tax collections, as are most communities in the Commonwealth. Fiscal year 21 was more of an anomaly that was, about 0.5% less than this year, but we certainly rebounded through some improved business practices and see strong commitment in these categories. Personal property there on the bottom, very similar. Again, not a lot of news there. Strong collections, modest growth within those categories. Happy to, I just want to get through one more slide, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board has. So my final slide is more of an accounting of how we work through the real estate collections on a day-to-day basis and through the financial aspects of the organization. So not only do we receive funds from the current year for real estate, but as folks get behind, maybe missed a payment in error, we do collect from prior years as well. So we had really strong collections across fiscal year 22 back to any prior year that was outstanding. Our outstanding receivables are very low in comparison. They're less than 1% of the total commitments that we're making in any given fiscal year. The thing that's not shown on the screen here is the payments that the properties that we've moved into tax title, and that's moved into a separate category, and we currently have about $965,000 in tax title properties. So that would be in addition to the balances that you're seeing there on the right-hand side of the screen. But as you can see, in fiscal year 21, we started with that outstanding balance of about $1.4 million, and we've collected almost $900,000 of those funds. So that has been shaved down to about a third what was anticipated. So we'll continue to collect on those. We'll move properties to tax titles as we're statutorily allowed to, but we just have continued strong revenue in real estate, which is our primary area and keeps us very stable and helps with that AAA bond rating. So happy to answer any questions, whether they're on the revenue side or some of the details on the expenditures.
Questions?
Not at the moment.
At the moment?
No.
I have a few. The meals excise tax?
Yep.
Isn't that, or is it higher than where we were before, just before COVID? I thought we were around 500.
I can tell you 1 second.
I mean, that looks like a really strong number.
It is a very strong number, and I guess what I was maybe not as clear as I should have been on, Lakeway Commons, a lot of new restaurants in that area, they were barely getting their feet under them prior to the pandemic, and then they've really come to life after the pandemic. If I look at meals tax, our highest prior year that I can see was $562,000, and that was in fiscal year 2019, and this year we're at $623,000, so you are right, that's a record high category for us.
And I don't think we saw hardly any restaurants close.
Not very many,
Right.
right.
That's quite remarkable considering what the restaurants went through. The cannabis number.
Yep.
I know that's only half of it, right, basically? That's the half that we can use, right?
No, that's 100% of the revenue that we.
That's 100%.
Yep.
But we can only, I always confuse this.
Yep, so 50% of that, roughly $150,000, is excise tax, and that can be spent on anything.
Yeah,
And the host community agreements or funding, which is, again, about $150,000, can only go to use to mitigate the impacts of the cannabis industry on the town, which we use for drug abuse resistance education.
okay, I thought that was, for some reason, I thought that was a different account. It wasn't counted in here.
It is in there.
But isn't that about what it was a year or so ago?
Yep. Fiscal year 21 actual collections were 284,000, and
So.
Yep. Excuse me. No, that's all right.
It's already semi-leveled up. Right? It's only been a couple of years. It seems like it leveled off already.
Yeah,
Give or
you're right.
take.
Yep. It's pretty level.
Can you expand on the departmental fees?
So this is anything that departments collect, whether that's through the police department for seizures, forfeitures, anything that is a fine but is not a license or a permit application.
Right, but and it's not a building permit, that's obviously separate,
Yeah.
but why was a $1 million jump? Well, it's not $1 million jump, it's above budget, but
Right, it's above budget.
it just seems like a big number for,
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll have to dive into it. About half of it's categorized in my spreadsheets. About 515,000 of that is all lumped together. So
It's okay, if you don't have it right
one
now.
of the largest categories is the reimbursements that we receive through Medicaid, though, is associated with the school department.
Yep.
That's in that category. That's about 665,000 of it. And that's really tough to budget for because we rely upon payments from the federal government and reimbursements. And sometimes they come in before the end of the fiscal year, at the end of the school year, and sometimes they don't. So literally, a matter of 15 days could mean, impact on that revenue category of $400,000 or $500,000.
And then the license and permits, that must be Northbridge and the Market Basket, probably.
That's
Yeah.
correct, yep. Those are the largest.
And that's pretty volatile. Next year, depending on what's going on, that could drop down to 800,000.
Yep. Well, yeah, our normal baseline is around 800,000, 850 for
Right.
that.
And just one other thing.
Yep.
On the balances, when you go to the tax revenue report,
Yep.
from 2021 to 2 questions. 2021 down to 2018, most of those things, if they're not paid, are going to make their way through tax title, right?
They will. They'll be moved before the end of the calendar year.
Okay. And then are the interest, is the interest that these delinquent accounts are accruing, is that in these numbers or is that a separate number?
It is not shown in this number right now, no.
Okay. All right, thanks. Anybody? Ms. Gaspar?
Yep, thank you. Mr. Missouri, can you explain how the new host committee agreement legislation that was passed just recently in the most recent session is going to impact our host community agreements and the number that we see yearly?
Yep. So under the best case scenario, we'd only be allowed to collect host community fees for 8 years. I think there's just a lot of uncertainty with what the cannabis industry is going to do to municipalities, whether they are going to challenge us legally about how we've used these funds and attempt to end the current agreements sooner than we may have already committed to and kind of force our hand legally. So the agreements that the board have signed with the 2 operators that are open and the one that is yet to open on the delivery business model provide for 3%, which was allowable under the law when you entered into it. And they were for 5 years. So it will be interesting to see how the industry responds to that new legislation, whether they go after municipalities. We've been very conservative in the approach that we've used to use budgeting and spending. I'm fully confident that how we're using this for preventing addiction and education in the school district is completely appropriate, as youth have greater opportunity for access to cannabis and the cannabis market. But we'll just have to see how the cannabis industry responds.
Thank you.
Part of that whole, with them dealing with that issue was because somehow municipalities were managing to negotiate above the 3%, right?
That's correct. Yep.
And we stayed to where legally we were supposed to.
Yep.
Yep. So everybody's going to pay the price for.
A few bad apples.
Right. Okay. Anything else on the financial? Nothing? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next order of business, a meeting with KIG Real Estate Advisors, Strategic Land Ventures to discuss a potential 40B development at 104 Main Street. And just to give people who are watching a little more definition on where that is, it's the intersection, the corner of North Quinsigamond and West Main Street. So, good evening.
Good evening.
They're here for moral support. Good evening. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yes.
Welcome.
Select Board, we appreciate your time as well as the management team to discuss a project that we would like to present at 104 Main Street. To my left is Steve Regal with Embark Architects. He is the architect that actually creates what we one day hope gets built. Bob Engler, who is our housing consultant. He is with SEB Housing. He has actually represented the town of Shrewsbury in the past and also presented before your zoning board more recently. Well respected, probably about 15,000 units of affordable housing in his career. And Matt Merva is with Bowler Engineering, which is a well-respected engineering firm in Massachusetts. I'll sit down if that's okay. I'm not sure what's appropriate on that basis.
If you want to pull up another chair, if you need somebody else here, it's okay.
I think we're okay. I'll chime in if need be.
Yeah, and we brought them to hit the core pieces, but since this is an introduction, we wanted to be.
Okay, but before you start, if either a gentleman are going to be making extended comments, at least go to the mic, because people who are watching can't hear very well when you stand over there, okay?
Great.
All right, thank you.
As you indicated, the site that we would propose is to do 190 units of housing, apartment housing that would be done under Chapter 40B. The desire is to do that under a LIP program, which is traditionally discussed or called a, sorry about that, that may be better for folks, a friendly 40B, which allows the opportunity for the host community to negotiate mitigation and other influences on the project rather than filing through a zoning board and doing a more traditional 40B project. I mentioned real quickly, my name is Justin Krebs with Krebs Investor Group. I'm an active developer throughout Massachusetts, have extensive experience developing multifamily housing in communities. We've actually worked very successfully with many communities on 40Bs to achieve LIP programs, most recently in Medway, and also have projects in Winchester that all of those host communities have been very happy with on that piece. So we do try to get into the community, work with the community, and find a way to work through that. The site, as I think people realize, it's 104 Main Street. We looked real quickly from the zoning district. Obviously, under 40B, it overrides the local district and sets what's appropriate within the overall guidelines. This is roughly a almost 6-acre site. And I won't bore people with the details on the actual zoning because, again, that would be, but it is a limited commercial business district. It has great accessibility right off of Interstate 290, and we think the site is well positioned for development. We included this in, but I won't dive into the actual setbacks because most of those under our proposed, you'll notice, meet or work within the constraints or exceed the actual required zoning district elements. So we're trying to be respectful of everything we could on that level. The site, and I think this is a good one for people's reference, it's located just off of Main Street between North Quinsigamond and the Main Street right off of the Interstate 290 exit. It's also in relatively close proximity to the high school, post office building, and overall I'll just talk through why we think these are positive site attributes for this project. As I said, one of the core issues and also issues with development, no matter what type it is the question of traffic. We think that this project is well served in its location, having almost direct access onto Interstate 290, as well as onto a major thoroughfare of Main Street. We think that this use, multifamily, typically generates less traffic than other commercial uses. International engineers or traffic engineers, I think, usually say 2 cars per unit or per 1,000 square feet. Commercial is higher at usually 4 to 6, and retail could be as high as 10 to 12. We believe the size and the scope is consistent with some of the other larger commercial uses that you can almost see in the imagery there. We think it's probably the highest and best use for the area. This site has not been actively used or developed on for probably 15 years. It currently really stores some trucks. It's used for some limited training, etc., but we don't feel that the site is of its best use. The site's been extensively disturbed, it's cut back, it's dirt. There's currently no active stormwater controls on it, so when we would develop a project, that would be highly engineered to control that. We think that's meaningful because considering it's near such a valuable resource at North Quinsigamond Lake. And I'm sorry, yes, and then we think this would generate a substantial increase in tax revenues. As part of any process we would do with you, we would do a fiscal impact study. We do that on all of our projects in the communities we work on. That is, very positive in most cases, even when weighing all of the impacts of that project. And that would be a natural next step as if we were invited to continue to move forward with this. We also think it's important, the state, as I think most people know, and I also believe Shrewsbury is in need of workforce or affordable housing. 40B requires to have that 10%. That plus the census data keeps driving the need for this housing. It's also very important for most communities to maintain the people that work and live in the community and offer affordable housing options. We also looked at some of your studies, and we do think that this is important to support workforce housing and some of the other baseline needs, because I think that was addressed in your production plan. So we're hopeful that this is consistent with that. And as I mentioned, I think under a LIP process, it does allow the town to work with us to address if there are impacts, how is that mitigation that we would provide best used to offset that. What are the feel of the design, the project, the overall scope of it, and it's a much more collaborative type approach with a lot more input than often a traditional 40B that is filed at the zoning board, generally under this is what we'd like to do. So with that, that's just a little bit of background. I could pause if there's any questions. If not, what I would let Steve do is present a little more of the overview of the project that we'd like to design and ultimately develop. And then if there were any specific questions related to affordable housing, the 40B process, Bob has a lot of insight, can comment on that. And if there were any baseline questions about other site impacts, civil, other items, we could work there. We have talked to different members of the municipal, of Shrewsbury's municipal and the Department of Public Works related to sewer capacity and other components. And I think we feel like, the project is viable, but obviously there'd be significantly more study on traffic, fiscal impacts, engineering, et cetera. This is really a conceptual presentation on what we would like to hopefully enter into a discussion about a friendly 40B with the town.
Okay. Anybody have any questions at this point? Or would you like to hear the rest of the presentation first?
I'm fine for them to continue.
Okay.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you, board members. Yeah, Justin, if you could just slowly take us through just a couple of the slides of the context photos. I'd like to end on the color site rendering if possible. So these are just a few views of the existing access, the existing curb site on North Quinsigamond, and you can see that the site is housed to some vehicles of no longer operating. So take us to the next one. This is just an aerial showing the site, almost 250,000 square feet. Next slide, please. And this is just our typical floor plan and our typical ground floor plan showing the mix of units that we would be proposing, but those things are flexible as we work with the town to fit specific needs. As Justin said, we did look at your housing production plan from 2019, and so we're willing to take that into account as we work through. If you could take us to the next one, this is one of my favorites, the colored site plan. And basically, I just want to talk very briefly about our approach to the site. I think what was important to us was to align with the natural gentle curve of Quinsigamond in order to provide maximum views to obviously the lake. We maintained the two existing curb cuts that are there now, but we are willing to work with the city if for some reason it makes more sense to have those relocated. We tried to maintain as much as possible the existing vegetation along Quinsigamond. We have a very large buffer there. And we also have a vegetative buffer around a majority of the site. We tried to keep as much of the existing foliage there as possible. But then when we moved into the site, we decided that we wanted to keep our building as tight as possible to the center of the site to really mitigate any impact that the height may have, that shadows may have, that, we may affect views. And I think we're pretty lucky. I think the housing production plan recognized that the town didn't have very large tracts of land in which to do affordable housing. And so the fact that this is available, but also in an area where we don't feel that we're going to be very impactful to neighbors or anyone's views. So those were all things that we tried to keep in mind as we respected the neighborhood. We are all surface parked, and that has allowed us to maintain 100% fire truck access around the entire site and through to the 2 existing curb cuts. We used our 2 wings down here in order to create a south-facing courtyard with pool area in order to take advantage of the solar orientation. In terms of the design, next slide, please. Next slide. One more. Now more into the sort of design. We felt, when we originally started looking at the volumes, one of the things is to make sure that the building didn't seem too large. And so one of the things that we introduced was these small gable roofs and balcony recesses in order to bring the scale of the project down and also provide some depth to the facade so that it didn't feel like, just a endless facade. Regarding the design, we are definitely open to feedback. This is a first pass. We are here to work with the city and, any issues that you may have. But we want it to be attractive and respectful. This is sort of a modern farmhouse, but at a larger scale. Materials we were looking for are generally fiber cement painted in varying exposures. But what we're trying to do here is with the balcony insets, we were looking at the use of a white cedar to sort of get textural where the tenants are actually going to be out and living. And to also, instead of having this dark recess, to have these pops sort of come out. And we were going to look to carry that language throughout the project. For a project of this size, we're going to have a rather typical amenity package. But it basically, we have a pool facilities, fitness. We're going to be working in some work from home spaces, club space, things that you would normally see in a project of this size. So, with that, I can open it up to questions, or if there was anything
Steve,
else.
the only thing I would say too is we are environmentally sensitive in what we develop. We try to use reclaimed materials, reuse materials, low chemically emitting elements. So it's a forefront of ours because we understand there is an impact that's done here. And I think the other thing I want to say is, as Steve says, we're very open to feedback in the design. Our attempt is to present something that, in our best mind, starts to fit within the context. We felt that there was, as Steve said, somewhat of a residential quality to this. Other buildings have very flat tops and facades, and sometimes those don't fit. Again, we can work within that context, but I think the essence is it would be a first-class building that would be marketed to families, young professionals predominantly because of the unit orientation, and would also, from that aspect, it's a relatively heavier weight towards 1-bedrooms, studios, and 2-bedrooms with a very limited. And again, that mix of units and bedroom types can be worked with. We think we've parked it very much sufficiently to satisfy the needs, but not have any overflow or burden. And I think the one thing that Steve did emphasize that I just want to come back to is really we have a tremendous natural buffer on that site. On the higher side is really where the 290 and that interstate is, and the slope goes down towards the lake. And the nice benefit is because of that grade differential, that buffer was really important to us to keep that natural tree line that is very high, mature, and developed to in many ways limit the visibility of the project, to not feel like it was too big or burdensome on the lake or on the community from a visual standpoint.
Thanks, Justin.
Questions, members of the board?
Just a few general questions.
Sure.
So, thanks for your presentation. In addition to Winchester, where else have you done projects?
Situate, Medway, Bridgewater, 2 in Winchester, Framingham, Brighton, and I'll call those are just more recently in the last, I'll call it 24 to 36 months. Order of magnitude is probably close to 1,000 units, probably $350 million in total project cost. We typically work with, just from a financing standpoint and capability, institutional investors, pension funds.
Okay.
So we try to present ourselves both with a very solid team on that basis, as well as we feel team members like Bowler, like Embark are first rate and are also first rate in that they are and has successfully worked with the communities we are to hear, to change things. We're working with another community that's in a very similar piece, and we just wrapped up the download after digging in with their whole key staff members, and as well as a couple of their select people. And the feedback was, thank you for responding. We know it took you some time to come back, but we really heard what they said, made adjustments to how the building was set, where it was along the curb line, those types of pieces. And we pride ourselves, because we do, like I said, it particularly when you're lucky enough to be able to engage under a friendly 40B and a LIP process. It is absolutely a collaborative thing, and you have to understand and hear people and not only give lip service, but actually make sure the design reflects, what that discussion was.
A few more, if I may.
Sure.
So thank you. With those projects, are those all 40B projects? And are they all LIPs?
All of those are 40B projects. About half of those are LIPs. And one of those projects has an affordable component, but was done with the community because they didn't have a requirement for the 25%, but they exceeded, so they did that at a 10% affordable level.
And the ones that weren't LIPs, is it
They were, to that end, Winchester has not had multifamily housing over 8 units since 1940.
Yeah.
And we were successful in permitting one project in the town, and effectively, I don't want to say invited back in, but they were happy to work with us on the second project. And it was even though it wasn't a LIP, it was still a very collaborative project that went through pretty smoothly, and they've been, happy with what we've been doing today.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple more. From a structure standpoint, I said institutional investors, debt and equity, or what's the usual?
Yeah, debt and equity. I think it's typical debt range of 60 to 65%, which is what's in the market. We don't tend to level heavier levels of debt. We have equity partners that like to tend to put significant amount of money into these opportunities. So it's usually 35, 40% equity in the deal.
Yeah.
It's not only their equity, but, a lot of my personal net worth and my partner's net worth is too, so we're very committed. One thing that we do pride ourselves on is we tend to be what we call a local developer. We're only in Massachusetts. Myself, my partners are very active. You'll see us, you'll call us. On the ongoing management side, we're around, we're responsive. I was down in Bridgewater this morning at 8 in the morning to address something that was raised. So we are proactive, and again, if there's an issue, you'll have my number, you'll have my name, and you can call me, unlike a larger corporation. Not that anything wrong with them, but that's how we approach it. We don't try to do production housing. We try to really design stuff that we're proud of, that we develop, and that we usually hold over the long term.
So these projects, usual same investors, same institutional investors? And then
Yes,
you guys
I will say a couple different ones, but they are of the same and they are repeat, yes. And they are names that represent pension funds that you'd be very well aware of, and, names that you would there. I'm not sure if I'm fully at liberty to provide that in this, but happy to get into that detail.
Usually
if there
structured
are
as a
questions.
limited partnership, or how do you usually?
Yep,
Okay.
it's
And you guys are
usually,
GPs?
we are the general partner, yeah.
Okay.
Clearly, you're very familiar on that structural side, but yep, that's
Okay.
how we.
And so thank you. And that carries the upside, which GPs would get. Makes sense. So, last question I have. So we have a few other projects in town, and just from a market standpoint, any concern at all, given other developments that are?
No, and I'd say, you can look at the state stats, you can look at the overall need, and we are still 30, 40,000 units below what we need in the suburbs from that standpoint. I'll also go, recent project we did in Framingham, delivered that in 2021. We delivered 258 units at that same time in the downtown area with less than probably 12 months. There was another 600 units built in that immediate area, 2 other projects less than a mile from that. Within less than 18 months, over 1,000 units were absorbed in Framingham, and they had a decent pre-existing stock. They exceed the 10% hurdle of affordability. So even with that dynamic, the absorption was very strong. And I think there are similar dynamics. The commercial side of the office markets in this area, just like in that Metro West corridor, you're part of it at one end versus the other, have found it very, very conducive. If you don't have that type of housing, not every person who works at a high-tech company or a biotech company or other facets has the ability to commit to living in a community for 20 years, but they're still a valuable member of that company and of the community, but they just don't have the type of commitment or duration that they necessarily can by the nature of their job. So, so I would say, yes, we're very happy with that. I mean, we've seen very strong absorption on all of our other projects. Large scale, nothing that's taken less than 12 months to be occupied. Our occupancy levels in those that are completed or are 95, 96, 97%. And that's not anything special we do, but we benefit from the market is good. And we wouldn't be in this community if we didn't think, even with what we are very aware has been developed and what we've watched from the absorption side, we're very comfortable that this is a good market that would receive this type of unit and product type, in a very economically normal way, consistent with the patterns we're seeing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Kessman?
Sure, thank you. Just a couple of questions. So let's just fast forward and say that this gets built. How long do you typically stay with a project? Are you involved in the management of it and the leasing and all of that? How does that work?
Yes, and being that I am a better builder and designer and financer of that, we typically hire first-rate institutional management companies, Graystar, Bizzuto. They bring very high levels of depth. They bring people who are specialized in the management of it. So they would be the manager. They would collect the rents. They would make sure the tenants, if there was something wrong in their unit, was fixed and that. But we basically speak with our management company on weekly calls, and also basically are usually on site on a regular basis. I was in Bridgewater this morning. I was at the Framingham project this afternoon. Tomorrow I'll be up in Winchester. That's the only comment I make about us being active and being there. So before a tenant even knows there's an issue or something we're not happy with, we know that. So I would say, yes, we're very active in a hands-on basis on those assets, and the assets that we develop are meaningful to us. We tend to hold them over a longer term, and tend to have a pride that I'm not saying other people don't in their development, but it is personal to us on that level.
Thank you. One more. Sure. How many of these units would be counting toward our affordable housing stock? Is it all of them?
It's a rental project, so if the 25% affordability stays or more, yes, all of the units would count towards the subsidized housing inventory.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Lynn, do you have a question?
I know this is still conceptual, and you mentioned studio 1, 2-bedroom apartments, and I can't really read the map well enough, but do you have a general idea of what the unit mix would look like?
Yeah, I would think under 40B, 10% is required to be 3 bedrooms. So that's basically where we'd probably lie on that unless we felt that that was there. Then we have usually a weighting that is maybe 30% to 35% 2 bedrooms. And then we would be the balance, so say 55% of the project would be studios and 1 bedrooms, and those can kind of blend between a 20, 30 or some range. What we really like to do and have had good success on it is, and I'll say this, the Framingham project, we chose to do 80% studios and 1 bedrooms, 20% two bedrooms because that fit where the market was, and there were a lot more in the pipeline, 3 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. So to the point about saturation, we actually get into that depth and try to design to what we think the needs are based on vacancy levels of different unit types. But generally, the product type we're driving towards is a studio 1 and 2 bedroom, really for the basis of we think that that's what serves the needs of people who often are in transitional housing needs, those people that are employed for a few years, early in their career, want to transition as long-term residents into Shrewsbury but can't find a home or waiting to have a home built, et cetera. Is that?
Ms. Lynn, do you have any other questions?
No.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Collins, go ahead.
Hi, I was just curious if your 1 and 2 bedroom units typically include an office or a den or a loft type room as well as the bedroom count?
We tend to look for, I guess I would call it, yeah, I mean, what we're trying to address is in a combination of those units, and in the project overall is developing spaces for work, home, live. So a lot of what we're developing in our common areas is small Zoom rooms, small breakout areas, and not that we still don't want people to have fun, but the traditional model of a pool table and a ping pong table, those spaces are now being often more driven towards really live, work, use type opportunities. So is that the orientation of your question, just to make sure I'm addressing it properly?
Yes, I was just, really clarifying if, sometimes people could consider like, an extra den in their apartment as, an additional bedroom space. And so having those like sort of flexible space rooms, if those are something that you typically include in your floor plan, or, if it's, kitchen, living room, and bedrooms strictly.
So I'll address that. I think at this point, we haven't decided which sort of model we're going after, but what a lot of time happens is we have a typical 1 or 2 available in 2 versions. A version where there's a larger living room dining where you can actually fit a table, and then a version where, you're really sitting at your kitchen, but you have an interior den that you can use as a work office. And what we do with ownership is we review both. We look at the market study, we talk to the town about the housing production plan. And if we decide, oh, hey, maybe 25% of the units are really going to benefit from this internal den, that's discussions we'll have. But all these discussions are on the forefront of all of our projects now, because of the pandemic. So something we definitely review with ownership as we lay out these units.
The one thing I would add to that is, that said, our den is not going to be a suitable extra bedroom.
No.
There's no window, there's no closet, and they're typically like 6 by 8, 7 by 9 at most, 6 by 9, 7 by, because it's usually where you're filling in a space. There aren't doors on them. So, we're trying to address it to be a use space, den, work office type, not for somebody to say, oh, I can slide another bedroom in. And I guess I just want to be clear, because I've had that question asked, which is making me think about it. No, we're not going to tell you, hey, we have a 2-bedroom den that is really a 3-bedroom, because unless you're, an infant, you're not even going to be able to make your way around that bedroom or that den space. Because again, typical measure would be probably 6 by 8 or 7 by 8 in that range. And it's typically square, set up to have a desk and maybe a sitting chair, but not to set up for a bedroom or even a pull-out couch.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Collins, do you have any other questions?
That's it for now.
Okay. When you go last, there's almost nothing left. I do have a question on the site plan.
Sure.
A lot of the, no, go back to that one. So on the Main Street side,
Yes.
you got the red line. Is the red line all around the site, basically the property line?
Yes.
So the space between the red line and Main Street is either town or state property, right?
We believe so, yes.
Yes.
Including that strange cutout that,
Well, the strange cutout is town, I know.
That's right,
You know
that's
that.
78R, and then the bufferway is either easement right, or town,
Right, but-
is highway right
So
of way.
they're, that we're pretty assured that if this went through, that space is gonna stay natural.
yes, that would be the intention.
And when you're talking your setbacks are from the red line into the paved area, correct?
So there's a couple different setbacks that are in play here. One is within this zone, I believe that there's a 25-foot encouraged setback from North Quinsigamond. And then there's also the building setbacks. So the
Okay.
building is well back from the setback. We have that buffer, and then we have our parking. And then we've tried to break up our parking with islands and trees so that it's not just a sea of asphalt as well. If that answers your question, sorry.
Yeah. I think for now, I'm good. I think they asked all the questions I was gonna ask, so. Mr. Mizuka, do you have any questions? Ms. Last, do you have any questions?
I do not at this time.
Before we wrap up, could you just briefly go over if they were to go forward, and either if we went with a lip or didn't go with a lip, what would be the process from here,
Sure.
basically?
So I'll explain the latter first. If they did not go forward with a LIP, they could work on their own with their design professionals and consultants and come to submit a comprehensive permit application with the Zoning Board of Appeals at any time that they wished, and then move through the comprehensive permit process with the Zoning Board of Appeals in that fashion. If they were to move forward with the LIP or the friendly 40B, I would see that they would request formally through the Board of Selectmen that we'd like to entertain a LIP agreement with the Board of Selectmen, which is a joint application with the applicant and the Board of Selectmen to the Department of Housing and Community Development. That LIP process to discuss if we want to enter or not enter into a LIP would be whatever the board would like. We could have a workshop, we could have a working group, we could function it through the manager's office or the staff to negotiate what types of items that we'd like to see in the LIP or not see in the LIP. And then if the board so would choose to sign that, it would be a joint application again that goes into DHCD. DHCD would review that application, would perform a site visit, would review the applicant's financials, the site design, site plan, and other matters, and then ultimately would issue or would not issue what's called a project eligibility letter. If that project eligibility letter is issued, then that's a green light for the developer to move forward with their furthering their design and their concepts, and then ultimately submitting that to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a comprehensive permit application and review. The board could decide that they want to or they do not want to enter into a development agreement before the applicant moves to the Zoning Board of Appeals process as well.
Okay. Either way, if we entered into a LIP or not, they still have to get the site eligibility. The state
Yes.
still has to approve the site.
That is correct.
Okay. And because we're not at 10% yet, sounds like a broken record, as we say this all the time, but they can go through with this project, LIP, no LIP, because we haven't got the 10%, we're not in safe harbor status.
We are not in safe harbor status for not being into 10% or meeting our 1% or 2% thresholds through production.
Okay, so, anybody else have any other questions, comments? Ms.
No,
Lynn?
Mr. Chairman, I know that we, just in the past meeting or two, went over sort of our current status, so it would be great to maybe update that, considering if we proceed with this.
Mm. Okay, anything else? Okay, I think we're good for now.
Well, we greatly appreciate all your time.
We'll wait to hear from you, your project, so,
Yep, no, that's wonderful.
okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening. Thank you all.
Okay. Ms. Conlon, you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay. The next order of business is to review and vote to call a special town meeting for Monday, October 17th, 2022 at 7 PM.
So,
Is there anything you'd like to say before we vote on that?
No, I just certainly we have sufficient business to get through both on financials, and we'll provide the board a draft list of warrant articles as soon as possible.
Okay,
move approval.
Second.
okay. We have a motion and a second. This requires a roll call vote. Ms. Gasman?
Aye.
Ms. Flynn?
Aye.
Ms. Samia?
Aye.
Ms. Conlon?
Aye.
Mr. DiPaolo, aye. Okay. 5-0, we're off. The next order of business, and actually, the next three items are related. So 8 is to review and adopt a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging commitment statement. 9 is review and act on the establishment of a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging committee. And 10 is to review and act on a charge and mission statement for the diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging committee. We'd have to vote on these separately, and we can start off with the first one, but the topics might kind of meld into each other, so if we want to begin the discussion on that. So as our work has progressed on the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, well, actually the committee in addressing the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, we've got to the point where we're at the point where we believe we're at the point where we can form a committee, have a committee charge, and create a commitment statement from the board related to this topic. The DEI task force report, we have reviewed that. We've decided how we're going to approach that. We're waiting for, we haven't made formal decisions, but we've decided how we're going to approach it. Various departments that are going to deal with it internally in Town Hall. We're waiting for comments back to finalize all of that. So that's in process. So that brings us to where we are tonight. We have draft statements to act upon, and I'll just leave that as an opening. Ms. Gasman, I think you had some thoughts that I think you can articulate this a little better than I just did.
That's okay. You did a good start. Yeah, I definitely have a couple of things comments that I'd like to make, just to walk it back a little bit and just let the public know what we've been doing. We've had several workshops with our consultant Visions. I want to say we've had 6 hours worth, so 3 2-hour workshops. And we've done a lot of work with them that's led us to this point. I also want to point out that we did have a subcommittee of Selectmen Flynn and Selectmen Conlon offer to work on drafting for us a commitment statement for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and also the committee charge. So thank you to both of them for the work that they did, because having those two members kind of flesh things out and bring something to our board really helped us in the last workshop that we had last week to be super productive and agree, which I think is monumental, because that was a challenge, coming to some sort of agreement. The other piece that I think you were referring to, Mr. DiPaolo, is that when people read our charge for the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee and compare it to what maybe other communities have, you may find the discrepancy in that and think that perhaps ours is not robust enough. But I think it's important to remember the place that we started from was a task force, and that the task force actually did many of the things that these more traditional diversity, equity, inclusion committees in towns are doing. And because we already had the task force take care take a look at our town as a whole, our policies, our practices, our procedures, our departments, it didn't seem to make sense to then ask a permanent committee to go ahead and do the exact same thing. So we were very intentional in working through the charge for the committee. And that's why you may notice a difference. And I know that you alluded to it, but we really sat down together in a workshop and we went through the task force report. Ms. Galusha was good enough to kind of take every recommendation and put it into a spreadsheet, and we sort of did the, I think of it as the Marie Kondo, right? It's like, what are you going to keep? What are you going to give away? What does not relate to you at all? And we found a way to say, okay, these belong to our board. They rest with us or they rest with the manager's office. These things belong with other departments within the organization, and these things really don't apply to us or they're not something that we can work on. And that's sort of where we are with the task force report. So completely separating out what the task force did from what this new committee is going to do. This is a fresh start. It's a completely different committee, and we certainly didn't want them to feel the responsibility of having to manage a task force report recommendations when that really did lie with our board and town departments. So happy to have anyone else jump in.
Sure. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add? No? No? Ms. Conlon, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I don't have any official comments. I think Beth, Ms. Cassivan, really kind of covered my thoughts on it as well. But I found our work that we have done with our consultant on this to be really valuable. And, additionally, outside of the 3 workshops we've had with the consultant, we've had several just as the board ourselves to work on these things. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done. And I think that we're really moving in a good direction that I'm excited about, and I think this is going to be really good for our community.
Mr. Chairman, I will just say I echo a lot of what Mrs. Casavan said. I think that I agree. The community may read both our commitment statement and the committee charge and think that it's light, but we wanted to leave space for the fact that we really want this to be community driven. And so allowing the committee to really focus on community engagement and feedback and to take this in the direction that the community wants and needs. We indicated that we set annual goals every year and we will be incorporating specific DEIB goals, as Mrs. Casavan said, that do tie back to some of what was included in the task force report. So I personally think that we wanted this to be authentic. We didn't want it to be just a check the box, but we also wanted to have some direction because we know that the committee that we're putting together is a committee of resident volunteers who only have so much time and bandwidth. So how do we really, give them some focus so that they can be effective as well? So while the documents initially are short, I think that we know that actions speak louder than words. So we didn't want to write 10-page documents and then, have that be it. So I think that we're committed to holding ourselves accountable and just having this be very much an ongoing process.
Right. And I would just like to add that I think as a board, that I think in this whole how to approach the top, I think we all believe that this issue needed to be addressed, but I think we all grew in our understanding of how it needed to be addressed. I think over time, and through the help of the consultant, I can speak for myself. I think I learned a lot in the process of interacting with other people, and also about all the nuances and whatever the right words are about this whole topic, and understanding more about the intricacies and why people react the way they do throughout the whole spectrum. And I have to say that I'm really proud of how we came together and we got to where we are right now. And some people are gonna like it and some people aren't. But I do think this is a reflection of what we think we should be doing right now, the community should be doing right now. And I think we all took the time to read a lot of mission statements, a lot of charges, and this seems to fit us right now, where we are right now. And I think that, the task force report actually was a good start. And I think that helped us get to where we are now. So I'm looking forward to getting this going and working with everybody in the community to see that this gets off to the right start. So it's taken a while to get here, but I really think we're in a good place. So anyways. Any other comments? No? Okay. If there are none, then I would ask for a motion to adopt the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging commitment statement.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion. The second requires a roll call vote. Mrs. Cassavant?
Aye.
Mrs. Flynn?
Aye.
Mr. Samia?
Aye.
Mrs. Conlon?
Okay.
Mr. DiPaolo? Aye. Okay, so voted.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I don't mean to interrupt, but
No, it's okay.
we haven't shared what the commitment statement is, so can we just
Oh.
commit to actually posting it so that
Oh.
it can be shared? Or should we
Yeah.
think about sharing it at this time?
Yeah, absolutely. We can get this on the website, right? We can have this on the website tomorrow. We can post it. We can post it on the website and we can post it on our Facebook page. We can post it on our website, right? On the Selectmen's page.
Do you want me to read it? Do you want to read it?
I'm sorry?
Do you want to read it now?
I want to read it now?
Do you want me to read it now?
You read these things better than I do, so. Do you want to read
former
it?
teacher.
Seriously, I'm not good at reading these
You
things.
go right ahead, Mrs. Cassavant.
All right. All right. I get to read it. All right. The Shrewsbury Board of Selectmen affirm our commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Our vision is for Shrewsbury to be a vibrant, inclusive, collaborative community where all can thrive. We are diverse in many ways: age, ability, citizenship, gender, financial status, race, religion, and sexual orientation, to name just a few. We originate from different places and we speak different languages. We have a broad range of beliefs, opinions, and viewpoints. Our diversity is a source of strength and character for our town. Our goal is to foster a culture where these unique characteristics are respected, valued, and celebrated. We will apply a DEIB focus to our decision-making and include specific DEIB objectives in our annual Board of Selectmen goals. Shrewsbury is your home, and you deserve to experience a strong sense of belonging. Together, we will continue to strengthen our municipal government and our ability to serve all residents.
Thank you.
And we noted that we have to continue calling ourselves the Board of Selectmen until it is approved at the legislature. So we'll change it when we can.
Okay. All right. The next order of business then is to review and act on the establishment of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee. We decided that the committee should be, or will be comprised of an intentionally diverse group of 7 members appointed by the Board of Selectmen. Committee members shall be appointed to staggered 3-year terms. For the initial year of appointment, there will be 2 3-year terms, 2 2-year terms, and 2 1-year terms. 1 member of the committee shall be a high school-aged Shoesbree resident, junior, or senior student serving a 1-year term. Let me go into procedures, but the committee shall annually select among its members a chair and vice chair. The majority of the committee shall constitute a quorum, and the committee shall be subject to and governed by requirements of the Open Meeting and Public Records Law and not written in here, but just so people who are going to be involved in it know, there will be staff support for the committee to help do their work. So, any other discussion on that? Okay. So, I entertain a motion.
Do you want to read the mission statement?
Sure.
At the next item.
I mean, it's probably not that far-fetched to just read the mission statement and the charge.
Establishment
Yes.
of the committee and then acceptance of the charge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, wait a minute. Yeah, we're good.
The mission statement for the committee,
Oh, wait.
oh, sorry,
First, we have to vote on the establishment of the committee.
okay.
Okay. So I move that we establish a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging committee.
Second,
Okay, we have a motion and a second. It requires a roll call vote. Mr. Cassavant?
Aye.
Ms. Flynn?
aye.
Mrs. Samia?
Aye.
Mrs. Conlon?
Aye.
Mr. Paulo, aye. So voted. Okay, the next order of business, to review and act on a charge and mission statement for the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee. Mrs. Flynn?
The mission statement is, the mission of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee is to support and foster an inclusive and equitable community that enhances belonging for all residents. The committee will act as in an advisory capacity to the Board of Selectmen and Town Manager and provide feedback to local governing bodies, boards, and committees on related topics. The charge and duties of the committee are as follows: facilitate discussions, forums, and events for town residents on topics of interest, organize community events, programs, and activities that promote and celebrate diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, recommend strategies to improve access to local resource programs and opportunities, and foster civic engagement with the goal of increasing diverse participation in town boards, committees, and the town meeting. And we noted that the committee shall make reports to the Board of Selectmen of its activities at least semi-annually. And as you noted, Mr. Chairman, that the committee will be comprised of 7 members.
Okay.
And I think that after we vote to accept this, we should probably discuss the process of selecting committee members.
Okay. So would someone like to make a motion?
I move that we approve the charge and mission statement for the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee.
Second,
Okay, we have a motion and a second. It requires a roll call vote. Mrs. Cassavant?
Aye.
Mrs. Flynn?
aye.
Mr. Samia?
Aye.
Ms. Collin?
Aye.
Mr. DiPaolo, aye. So voted. Okay. What would you like to do with the committee?
I think it's important just to note that we are appointing. I don't know if you read that we appoint them. The Board of Selectmen appoints
Yes.
the members. I think we should advertise.
Yes.
I do too.
And I also think it's the end of summer and people are wrapping up summer and starting school next week. And so we need to build in an extra week so that we make sure that people are aware that this is happening. So like if we were gonna give it 3 weeks or 2 weeks, I'd give it
We're-
3 weeks.
Where would 3 weeks? Well, our next meeting is, what, around September 9th,
I think that's too soon.
13th.
13th?
September meetings are the 13th and the 27th.
I'm thinking that the application should be in by the next meeting. And we should have a target date of appointing on the following meeting.
The
That would give us a
27th?
chance to review it all.
Wouldn't you have them by the 20th then?
What?
By the 20th?
No, our next meeting.
Our meeting's the 27th, but have applications in by the 20th.
Yeah.
Even the 22nd.
Yeah, I suppose we could do that, and then,
Gives us ample time, as we've done in the past, if you folks want to talk to prospective candidates.
Just wanna I wanna make sure we have enough opportunity to really publicize this well and make sure that we reach into,
right, okay, I was thinking of having the time to process ourselves, the applications, and I guess, I don't know what the best way to do this is, but the scoring thing?
I think we're gonna have to do, you know this is the thing that, like, my head doesn't work. When we have that many appointments to make at one time, it has to be on a grid. It has to go through the
Depending on
office.
How many applicants we have to.
Yeah.
And I think we're gonna have a fair number. If it's anything like the task force,
Wha-
there were a lot of applications.
Why don't we say the applications have to be in by the 20th? And between now and our next meeting, we're gonna have an indication of how many we're gonna get. And we could be thinking about how we want to process that. We might have to do the grid.
You have to do there's no other way.
I don't really like it, but I don't know how else you can do it.
Well, I think the grid is required in order for us to determine who gets the 3-year, the 2-year, the 1-year, correct?
Yeah, probably. Right?
Or people could indicate in their application if they prefer a term as well. That could be an option.
Or a number of votes.
Great
Yeah,
idea.
or a number of votes. We had an affordable housing trust with 5,
Yeah.
it took forever.
Ranked choice
so-
voting?
Just go by number of.
Isn't that
votes.
how we did CPC? By the number of
Yeah, I'd go number of
votes
votes.
they got.
We did affordable housing trust the same way, the number of votes
Yeah.
that we had at the end.
I
of
just think that's the
tiebreaker.
best way to, and that's also how we appointed the original task force, even though it wasn't a term, it was by number of votes.
Yep. Get
So
the
it's the
results.
same way we did the other ones?
I think we should.
It worked.
Yeah, okay.
Tail or tail, at least we don't get the results until the meeting.
Right. I just want to make sure that we have enough time to talk to people if we get like 30 applications.
Well,
I was just going to say, I think the 20th is too tight if we plan to vote on it on the 27th.
That's why I was
Let's do
thinking
the
the week
13th.
before.
I mean, we can split the difference.
Amend by this Friday the 16th and gives you 6 business days.
And my concern is that right now we're at the end of summer. We have Labor Day coming up. People are not tuned in right now. So we're gonna, I just think the more time we can get people to come in, the better.
We have
Yeah,
to
but
think
we-
about the high school student too.
Understood.
They-
The school is not gonna be rocking and rolling until first, second week of September.
So
The
we,
16th gives quite a bit of time.
but we'll see these as they come in, correct?
We can call as it comes on. You're
So-
not gonna be able to call 10 people at once.
I can reach out to people as I receive interest letters.
Mhm.
We can have it go to the Selectmen email, like
Mhm.
switch for.
Right.
housing trust.
Yeah.
I think too, if we're engaged with the school department superintendent and his updates, where we're including a high school student, if we could also encourage him to send a message to the parents that this is an opportunity that can help us to expand our reach.
You can read the thing, read the applications, start talking to people, but you really can't start making a decision who you're gonna vote for until you see all the applications. So you really, I don't know, I think Ms. Flynn's right. I think the 20th is, I think it's cutting it close.
I'm willing to rally.
Mhm.
I'm willing to rally. I agree. I want to give people ample time and ensure that we do as much as we can to solicit applications.
Okay, 20th? We agreed on 20th?
Works for me.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. The 20th. And you flood the airways, right? Oh.
Yeah, because we need to make sure we hit St. John's and, like, not just Shrewsbury High School, but like, we have to make sure it goes broadly. We've got Assabet and AMSA, and our kids go different places.
I got a couple ideas of outreach too, so I'll let you know later. We can talk about it later, we didn't talk about it now. Okay, so we're good on that? Okay. Good. Okay, next order of business is to review and act to sign the warrant for the 2022 state primary.
Move approval.
Second?
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. Cassavant?
Aye.
Ms. Flynn?
Aye.
Ms. Samia?
Aye.
Ms. Collin?
Aye.
Ms. DiPaolo? Aye. Okay, so voted. Item 12 is to review and act to approve the proprietary phone system for the Shoesbree Police Station building project. Ms. Celeste, do you want to just quickly review that?
Absolutely. For members of the board and the public, the police station building committee is continuing to work with our construction manager, Fontaine, and our architect, Tecton, and our owner's project manager, CMS. It has been identified that the town of Shrewsbury uses a phone system called Forerunner Technologies throughout all of the buildings within the town of Shrewsbury. And we have identified that if we were to go out to bid for a phone software system for the police station and we do not receive a favorable bid from Forerunner, that we would be at a comparable loss, that we don't want to disconnect each of the buildings in terms of the phone system that we use, and we would be at a penalty from Forerunner. So the building committee voted at their last meeting to request from the Board of Selectmen that we approve a proprietary phone system. This is one of the allotments that is allowed under Chapter 30B, which is the state procurement law. So the Board of Selectmen oversees the land and the project of the police station building committee. So we would be asking for your vote this evening related to that proprietary specification for the phone system.
Move approval.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Ms. Cassavant?
Aye.
Mrs. Flynn?
Aye.
Mr. Samia?
Aye.
Ms. Conlon?
Aye.
Mr. Paulo? Aye. Okay, so voted. Item 13 is to review and act on the road race request for Barefoot Half Moon Marathon on Sunday, September 4th at 7 a.m., beginning in Sterling and ending at the Shoesbree High School parking lot. This race went on last year. Are we squared away with police, no police, whatever?
I reached out to the school department, they have no issue with them using the, like, cul-de-sac at the high school for
Yeah.
the finish line, and police department said it looked good to them.
Okay, okay,
Move approval.
Second?
okay. Any further discussion? Do you have a roll call vote? Ms. Cassavant?
Aye.
Ms. Flynn?
Aye.
Ms. Samia?
Aye.
Ms. Conlon?
Aye.
Mr. Paulo, aye. So voted. Okay, next we have an email dated August 15th from George Woodruff, 5122 Avalon Way, regarding our opportunity. So noted. Item 15 is an email dated August 14th from Robert Holland of the Scholarship Committee, just forwarding a thank you note from Alexander Lujan for the scholarship she received this year. And she's obviously off to college, so congratulations. That's all I have on my agenda. Is anything else to come before the board in open session? No? Okay, a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
To roll call that?
Roll call.
Nah, real technically, yes. Ms. Cassavant?
Aye.
Ms. Flynn?
Aye.
Samia?
Aye.
Ms. Conlon?
Aye.
And Mr. Paul? Aye. This evening is adjourned. Good evening.